Hello and welcome to the Totally Human podcast. I'm Andy Cast and I'm an HR consultant for ProAction HR. This podcast is about the psychological challenges which drive us to distraction, the little foibles and ingrained habits, the tracks we play in our brains which make us behave the way we do. We're going to attempt to call out some of these, talk about our own personal experiences and demonstrate we all have them because we are totally human. Finally, we'll offer some tips and hints on how you can tackle these brain monsters. In every episode, I'll be joined by the ProAction HR business psychologist, Joe Nicholson, who will add an air of professionalism and academic expertise to my somewhat chaotic, totally human ramblings. So, Joe, what are we talking about today?
Morning, Andy. A lot of our discussions when we're meeting always seem to come back to anxiety.
Yeah.
And how that has been an undercurrent throughout our lives and how it affects us day to day.
Yep.
So the topic for today's podcast is anxiety. I think where I'm coming from is going to be more my personal experiences with it rather than any psychological expertise. This isn't my area of expertise, actually, anxiety, but it's something obviously we consider for the psychological health and well-being of all.
Yeah.
But I certainly do have a lot of personal experience of it. How about you, Andy?
Absolutely. Anxiety is a huge topic, Joe, and I do wonder how we're going to talk about every aspect of anxiety, because I can think of several versions that I suffer from. There's social anxiety, time anxiety is a big one for me, and I can tell you more about that. Performance anxiety, and obviously there's generalized anxiety on top of that.
And we obviously talked about imposter syndrome last time. That all obviously overlap with it somewhat. And there's health anxiety, which I also have of. So I don't think we can expect to cover everything of all those different types. But I think what we can do is talk about the things that impact us today or have impacted us to be the person that we are today. And we can see where we go. We might not be able to cover a lot of the ground in the time that we have. But I think some of the things that we can share, will hopefully help others feel like they're not alone, which is why we do the podcast.
Okay, well, why don't I kick off with something didn't happen today or yesterday, but the day before. I think I had a bit of a panic attack, which is probably a really bad phrase, but I had a lot of anxiety about a piece of work that I was delivering. I was using some technology, which is new to me, never done it before, so there's a lot of graphics involved, a lot of typesetting, and I thought something would take me about an hour to finish off. I'd already spent quite a lot of time on it. It ended up taking me about 4 hours. The reason that it took me that long was because I started to get more and more worked up about the performance and how good it was. So I suppose a bit of performance anxiety there, or would you think it was a different type of anxiety?
Well, obviously you'd given yourself an expectation on time. So you're probably feeling like you've got a time constraint and performance anxiety. But tell me more about the feelings that you were having during, to make you realise that you were having what you called a panic attack.
I felt that it wasn't going to be good enough, which probably puts into the imposter syndrome. But I felt that I wasn't good enough because I should be better. My mind was racing, thinking, what are the implications if I don't get this perfect? There was obviously a lot of the perfectionism coming out of me as well, because I just wanted to be perfect. And the more I looked at the document that I was producing, the more I thought, no, this isn't quite right. And so I ended up going over and over and over and over again with the document, trying to make it absolutely 100% perfect. And in the end, I couldn't even think of what I needed to do to fix it. And it got to the point where I was hyperventilating, my mind was racing. I could even feel the stress and the tension build up inside me. Yeah, so that's how I was feeling.
So at that point, when you felt a build-up of feeling overwhelmed, I suppose, would you use that word, of everything, just all the thoughts racing around that you couldn't cut through?
Yeah.
What were you telling yourself at the time?
This isn't good enough.
Right. And now if you think about that, was that true?
If I apply some logic to it,
it's
a new piece of software that I only recently started using. I am not, I was going to say I'm not an expert in the document. I'm a learner. This is a new thing for me. I know what good looks like because obviously I've asked people to create this stuff for me before. So I know what it should look like and I know in my head what it should look like. But there was a complete disconnect between what I wanted it to look like and what I was able to make it look like. So yeah, looking back at it logically and without as much emotion, although I can feel the emotion building up right now, without the emotion, I wasn't being fair to myself by any stretch of the imagination, because it's a new thing and you have to learn how to do stuff. You have to give yourself time, and I didn't give myself that time. And I had an expectation I'd be able to deliver it, and it was an unrealistic expectation.
So what do you think has happened between that event that happened a couple of days ago and you now seeing the logic? You obviously couldn't access that logic at the time,
No.
because that would have been because of all the cortisol that had been building up and you couldn't access the rational side of your brain. What's happened between then and now for you to be able to access the logic?
So I think there is no cortisol running through my brain, although I can feel that adrenaline build up right now. But the stress hormone made a big difference to me. So for some reason, cortisol was running through me, and it stopped me seeing sense. 2 days ago, that's where I was. Over that 48 hours, I have been able to look back with the benefit of not having the cortisol. I breathed a few times since then as well.
Yeah.
I've talked about it with you already once.
Yeah.
I've talked about it with Paul, my other half. It wasn't helpful at the time, but
Yeah.
it was helpful after.
Yeah.
I suppose I've just reflected.
Yeah. So time, letting that all dissipate helps you then be able to access that rational side of the brain that helps you see it a bit more rationally and help access some of the things, more of the helpful thinking. But at that time, when your brain is rushed with it all, and even though you perhaps know that it's not true, to try and stop yourself when you're in that state of all of that panic and overwhelmedness is the hardest thing, isn't it? And perhaps you even know that you should breathe, and it's like, well, I don't want to just breathe. Oh yeah, okay, no, shall I breathe, shall I? And then, of course you're breathing. I mean, I had a similar circumstance a couple of months ago, and it was out of the blue, and I was so on edge. Those physical manifestations of just pumping and wanting to run away, just literally wanting to run away. And I think I just said to my daughter, come on, we need to go for a walk, and literally pounded it out in the streets. For years before that, I didn't know that that was a solution, just to give me that time away, take that space and letting it all dissipate. And of course, that time it really, really helped, but it took a lot and just marching to get it out. But it takes something to know that actually when you're feeling like that just time, breathing, giving that interjection to step away from what you're doing just helps that feeling of overwhelmness just come down a little bit, and it will be okay. Because what's ironic, at that time when you were feeling like that, you were okay, weren't you? You were okay. There was nothing bad was happening to you. It was just your mind putting all this pressure on yourself. Thanks for sharing that experience, because I know it's tough, and obviously you felt some of that emotion come back when you were talking about it.
Yeah,
and anxiety can have some of these really debilitating side effects. I mean, obviously, historically, it had a very positive impact in the fact that if you were feeling threatened or under stress, you needed this hormone to get you out of there, or, this classic fight or flight. So, there is a positive to anxiety. It can actually help us sometimes achieve some good work, or we get some positives out of it. But it's actually knowing that when it tips over to that unhelpful bit of what we can do to help ourselves. What do you think of that?
Absolutely. And I know that any strength, when it's overused, becomes an overused strength and becomes a negative. It becomes something that impacts us badly. I suppose I've got a lot better at managing that stress, and I know that I have to breathe, and I know that 2 minutes of deep breathing will rid my body completely of cortisol. It's a biological thing. But as you say, when you're in the middle of that feeling, the last thing you can do is actually just calm down. So yes, I think if we can use stress positively, and I'm saying stress, anxiety, they're all on a similar wavelength. Stress is good to a certain extent. It's when we let it take over that is the bad side.
Yeah. What I found quite interesting in terms of what we're just saying, there's a couple of things I want to come back on.
Yeah.
Obviously, what you had was an experience where that stress feeling really reached a peak, a culmination of this sort of heart racing and sort of feeling of panic. But I remember for years, and I'd be interested to know whether you feel the same. I didn't even know what it was called. Didn't know it had a name. I was probably in denial that I had it. And I probably felt it my whole life. But this constant sort of dialogue in my head, they're not voices as in telling me to do things, but I'm an overthinker. Okay, we know that. I don't stop thinking, but my brain doesn't ever stop. And it's either thinking about what happened or what's going to happen. And obviously, anxiety is all about the future and worrying about the future. I never thought myself as a worrier. I'm not a worrier that bad stuff's going to happen. I'm a risk taker and all that. But it'd be constantly on the go all the time. There's this to do, then there's that, and then there's that. You know, always striving for that perfectionist, always striving to achieve. They used to call me Gojo because I'd just constantly be going. And all of this is all to satisfy my brain thinking forward all the time.
Yeah.
And that for years then came to a point where it's actually I started to feel pretty much uneasy. It wasn't a panic attack as such, it never culminated into that. It was just constant. And to the point then that actually life was happening somewhere over there. It wasn't right in front of me. I wasn't really present anymore because what I was present in was all these thoughts in my head about the future. And I stopped being present, which is actually really sad when you've got children who are growing at a rate of knots. And, you know, obviously I was there for my children, but I should imagine I was probably reading a book to one of my children whilst thinking about, well, when I've written this book, I've got to do this and then I've got to do that and then there's that. But what about that? Or I'm thinking about this. What about the holiday? All the time. Yeah. And I actually see it in one of my children now, her brain constantly going. So for me, there's this sort of two feelings of anxiety, this physical sort of feeling of one when it culminates in a very unpleasant panic attack that's quite scary. But there's almost this sort of underlying hum of constant feeling of just feeling a bit sick when you wake up in the morning, just uneasiness and knowing just on edge, permanently on edge, which I think I found really stressful and exhausting. I think I found it tiring because I was constantly just trying to bring myself back to the here and now, which wasn't where I naturally was. How about you? Have you had similar sort of day-to-day experiences with anxiety?
Yeah, so you said that you're not a worrier. I think I probably am a worrier. I will worry about things, and I've inherited that from my mum. I mean, my mum is the number one worrier in the world. She will worry about everything, mostly me, my brother and my sister. If one of us is okay, she'll worry about the other two. You know, if two of us are okay, then she'll worry about the other one. If there's something going on in anybody's life, and if all three of us happen to be okay at the same time, which, you know, is difficult at times, there's always something going on in life, she'll worry about other people in the family, or she'll worry about friends. She will worry constantly. And I am a believer that, you know, a lot of the way we are is because of how we were brought up. And, you know, you mentioned your daughter. Did my mum put those feelings of worry into me because I saw her doing it so much? So I accepted that that was the way to be. That's how I should live. I think there's a lot that happens when we are in our formative years that impacts our psychology and impacts the way we are as adults. So certainly the worrying I think I got from my mum. I inherited it. I don't think it's generalized anxiety. So I don't think I have that hum that you described that's going on the whole time of worry. But certainly I worry a lot. I'll be thinking about tomorrow, or I'll be thinking about next week, or I'll be thinking about the next piece of work or what I need to do next. Even now, I'm thinking about the piece of work that I've got to do this afternoon. The overthinking piece, yeah, it certainly rings true for me.
Yeah, and with that, I think because you've got this sort of lot of thoughts going on, how do you manage it? I know that it drives my husband absolutely nuts because one thing I try and do is control things. And it's not because I want to be controlling to get my own way. It's because I don't have to have it in my mind as a thought of something to do. If it's done, or I know I can do it, or it's just about control is a way of me coping with all these thoughts, all this anxiety. So I don't know whether you have a mechanism for your worrying, or it has another side of effect for you.
Yeah, probably the control thing is probably accurate, even though I would hate to say I'm controlling, because I don't think I am controlling.
I'm not controlling, Andy. Definitely.
No, definitely not controlling. I like to think I'm quite laid back about most things for other people. It's me that I control. But having said that, I mean, Paul and I are totally opposite when it comes to time. So I have to be early everywhere. And I'll be preparing for something to get ready, 2 hours before an event. And he'll still be in bed because, he says, I can do that 10 minutes before. And I'm finding actually that my time anxiety is getting worse as I get older, because I now inflict my time anxiety on him, even if it doesn't involve me. So if I think he's going to be late for work, I will start getting worked up about it. And that's his issue. No, that's his issue. But I will start saying, isn't it time you went? Shouldn't you be leaving by now? Do you think you ought to go now? And he gets really cross about that, because he says that it's my time, and if I am late, it'll be my responsibility. But I find that it really works me up. Where did that come from?
Well, again, it might be that it was something that was important to you growing up, or it might just be, as I say, one of your values now. Or one of those values, it obviously is a value of yours now, but yes, where that value came from, I don't know. You mentioned earlier about my daughter. I have 3 daughters. One of them is completely and utterly laid back about everything. I'm a believer of the nature and nurture in terms. There's there'll be the inheriting of the genes, and then it's the environmental factors that will either bring them out or not. So you're predisposed to it. But I see a lot of me and my daughter, but that overthinking happened to me from a very young age. So I think there will be a predisposition to do that. Mine specifically was health anxiety. So,
explain that a little bit more for people who don't understand what health anxiety is.
Okay, so it sort of triggered for me when I had my first child, and all of a sudden I was very conscious of me being alive and staying alive for my child, being there for a baby who was completely dependent on me. So for someone up to that point who was completely and utterly infallible, would jump out of a plane and jump off a bridge and all this sort of stuff, suddenly the smallest lump that I found, that was it. I was scared and panicked that I was going to die. Everything. And that physical panic was permanently there. And I could just be going around my normal business, and all of a sudden I'd look down, see a mole, and I'd be like, oh, it's changed. That's it. I'm going to die. Everything catastrophized to I'm going to die. Now, whether you can put this down to postnatal experiences, I don't know, but there was definitely that trigger. I didn't have it before, had a baby and had it. And that is when I can definitely recognize my anxiety. As I say, I think I've always had it, but actually that sort of feelings are sort of was at that point. I remember going to the GP and talking about the way that I was feeling, and I didn't even know then what it was. I actually didn't, for all my psychology, I didn't know I had anxiety. I'd studied it, but I didn't equate, like you, didn't equate that was what I was feeling.
Yeah.
What other types of anxiety do you think specifically impacts you?
Well, a big one for me is social anxiety. Every time I go to an event where I don't know anybody, I get very anxious about it. So I build myself up. And in fact, it's not even an event anywhere where I don't know someone that I've got to interact. So new job, I'd get social anxiety. Going to a new meeting where I don't know people. While it's called social, it's not social stuff. It's anywhere where I've got to socialize. Is the definition of socialize to do it with people that are friends? Because it could just be work, colleagues, networking events. Hate them. Absolutely hate them.
Okay, so to help someone understand this better, I can say, for example, I know what anxiety feels like. I do have a degree of anxiousness about those things that you've just said. So if I was going to a network event, I'd feel nervous. If I was going to a social event and I didn't know anyone, I'd feel nervous. But I wouldn't necessarily feel anxious or anxiety in the same way that I have it for health anxiety. So I think a lot of people feel anxious about such things like that. But for you to go that further bit and say that you have social anxiety, I'm just trying to make that distinction. How does it make you feel?
I start to get the sweats. I get a dry mouth. I start to catastrophize about the fact that, the way I look. In the morning, if I'm choosing my outfit, probably I've done it the night before because I'm feeling so nervous about or anxious about this event. I'll have chosen my outfit the night before. I'll put it on in the morning and I'll look in the mirror and I'll think, oh my God, I look so fat. Or I'll look and I think, I am so ugly today. People will judge me because I'm ugly and fat. It's that build up. And once again, I can feel it in my chest right now because I'm talking about it and thinking about what I feel like when I have to go to an event. I think it's the fear of the judgment. Okay. And I know that it's me judging myself. That's the thing. It's me judging myself.
All right. So this is obviously a podcast. You're not sat there as someone with a weight problem. You know, it's nothing that most people would think that you've got something to feel self-conscious about. It's just obviously something that you're picking up on because you're feeling anxious. Is that right? I'm trying to paint a picture for people who are listening on a podcast that, you know, you're someone who of an average build, you're worrying about how you're going to be judged because you're anxious about it.
Yeah.
And you're honing in on your appearance, are you? That's what they're going to notice more than anything.
That is the first thing that they'll see.
Okay.
I suppose my outward appearance is the first thing that I'll be judged upon. So the next thing that I'll be anxious about is what I'm going to say and what I'm going to do. But the very first thing that goes into my head is, what do I look like? Because it's the first thing they see.
And again, I'm not taking anything away from you, but a lot of people worry about what they look like and what they're going to say if they're going to something new. But we're not necessarily getting the sweats and the dry mouth. Well, I'm just thinking, actually, when I do go to a networking event and I've got to speak for that first time and I don't know anyone, there is that nervousness when you're just thinking, actually, I've got that dry mouth. But as I say, I don't think I have social anxiety. So I'm just, you know, do you get to the point that you really don't want to go? Like, you literally...
I avoid as much as possible. My sense of duty will jump in and override the social anxiety, but it won't override it on the day or the night before or the build up in between. So if you said to me, I really need you to go to this event, of course I will go, but I will work myself up for days before at the even thought of going.
So, Andy, for you, is there an end point that we talk about catastrophizing, don't we, when we talk about things happening in our lives, and when we're feeling anxiety, we could catastrophize it to that point that me, with my health anxiety, I see a lump and I'm catastrophizing it to the nth degree that I'm going to die. And that to me is a classic sort of anxiety feeling. Now, for you with social anxiety, do you find yourself caught up in catastrophizing, and what would be the end point of that social anxiety for you?
That's a good question, because I don't think I've thought of it before. If I had to play through my thinking, I think it's because it's social anxiety. That's the difference between social anxiety and performance anxiety for me. I mean, I get performance anxiety too, but performance anxiety will be about doing something and being judged on my performance. Social anxiety is the fact that I've got to meet lots of people and I really don't want to. Now, I am absolutely fine with people on a one-to-one basis. Not an issue at all. 2 or 3 is fine for me. Immediately you start to put in 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, that's where it gets too much for me, and I become overwhelmed with thinking about all of these people that I have to interact with.
And I get that, actually. I understand that, because anxiety is when you start being overwhelmed, isn't it? And maybe because you think so much about everybody, you'll be thinking about meeting that person's need. What is that person thinking? How do I understand what that person wants? And you'll be thinking about everybody all at the same time, probably beyond what you can cope with, and so you become overwhelmed. Maybe that
sounds really, really plausible to why I would feel anxious about it.
But it's that thing again, isn't it? The classic is, does it matter that much to you what these people think of you? Is it, you know, if you didn't get it right, if you didn't understand what they wanted, or you didn't get what they meant, does it really matter what these people think?
No, not in the grand scheme of things. You know, if I go to a networking event and I get nothing from it, is that the end of the world? No, of course it's not, because there'll be other networking events I could go to, even if I was amazing, which I'm sure I normally am, Joe. But even if I was amazing, at these networking events, I'm still probably going to walk away with nothing 9 times out of 10. And is that why I'm going in the first place?
Yeah, it's a real challenge, isn't it? Because you sort of think, I feel like this, and as you know, I often have this, like the whole imposter syndrome and stuff. If I feel like this, why am I doing it? Why am I putting myself through it? It feels uncomfortable, so I don't want to do it. However, in my life, I want to achieve certain things. I want to look back and know that I've done X, Y, and Z. I'm only going to be able to do Y and Z, for example, if I push myself beyond what I'm comfortable with. For you, it might be okay for you to reach your Z. It might be a path that takes you into these networking events or socials or things like that so you're putting yourself in this situation of feeling really uncomfortable and anxious, and you can think, but I need to do it because to get where you want to go. And
there's more to it than that, actually, and I'm just sitting here thinking about what you're saying. It's not even necessarily what I'm going to get out of it. I feel a duty and an obligation to do these things. So I feel a duty and obligation to do these things, because if I don't, I'm letting somebody down. Another thing, so and on the same level, and this is going away from the social anxiety, but it might be the reason that behind my social anxiety. And I shared yesterday on LinkedIn my story about my mental health issues. It's Mental Health Awareness Week, so I felt a duty and an obligation to tell my story so that other people might avoid experiencing what I experienced. When I was writing it, I felt anxious about it. When I was publishing it, I felt anxious about it. And I sat there and thought, why am I putting myself through this? I don't need to. Nobody's expecting me to share this apart from me.
Yeah.
Nobody would even know if I didn't.
No one's going to think bad of you if you didn't.
No.
If you were to say what your values were in life, do you know what they are? What your value drivers are?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, whether they'll be the right words for the values, but honesty is important to me. Integrity, hugely important. Doing what I say I'm going to do, which is the integrity bit. Helping people to be, well, however it's helping people, making people's lives better in whatever way I possibly can, supporting others. And there's probably a few more, but those are the ones that come off the top of my head really easily.
But you can see, can't you, why you wanted to share your experience, because it's important to you and your values. So to you, it was important to share them. And if you weren't going to share them, then you were probably letting your value down in some way or what have you. I don't know whether I've jumped to 5 steps.
No, but that is exactly it, isn't it? I was letting the value down. So was I letting myself down? I was letting the value down. I wasn't letting them down because they don't know. Until I share it, they don't know. They're not expecting me to do it. But somewhere inside me is this need to meet my values. Those values are so strong that if I don't meet them, it makes me anxious.
But here's a thought. Values aren't real. They don't exist. As in, they're a concept. I don't know. I'm going to go away and do some research now on values, because I have exactly the same values as you, and it drives a lot of what I do and pushes me through. Yeah. It pushes me into a lot of uncomfortable territory, but I face that, and as I make a choice at that crossroads. Do I do it or don't I? Because I want to achieve that end story that is true to my values. But there's nobody judging me on those. There's not a value person, is there? Going, there isn't this sort of helping others value going, well, you didn't quite meet the mark there, so
what about at the end of life, will I be judged by what I've done?
But this is it, I know that neither of us are particularly religious in that way. I don't believe in a day of reckoning that I'm going to have this sort of thing, but I believe it's an old-fashioned thing, isn't it? Treat others like you'd like them to treat you. What I believe in karma. So if you're good, good things happen, and if you are quite bad, at some point it's going to come back and bite you in the bum, and I think that's the thing with these values. I want to be true to my value because it's important. However, no one's going to know if I don't. No one even knows what my values are unless I share them. It's just so ingrained in me that I really want to understand this a bit better, and maybe I'll come back on this and we can talk about it another time. But for you with your anxiety, what's interesting, isn't it? Bringing it back to that, you're making yourself behave in something that actually you're not very comfortable with. And you're doing that because you're driven to do it to meet a value. And it's given you some pretty strong physical and mental side effects, if you like, that are unpleasant. I would like to know how fixed values are, how they change, How easily are they to change, and why do they drive so much behaviour? But actually, are they a positive thing? Because if it's making us behave in a way that's uncomfortable, but we're going to achieve some good out of it, then maybe it's actually not a bad thing to know that they're not on their own.
Yeah.
I think just going back to that social anxiety piece, Andy, because it is important, is that a lot of people feel nervous about going out, but not a lot of people, the anxiety associated to it are quite different. And you're not on your own if you're feeling anxious about going out. And I can imagine, Andy, is it different during lockdown because of lockdown? I mean, in some ways it's been probably quite good because you haven't had to go out that much. It's removed some of the pressure. But
Absolutely.
the thought of going back out into the world, how are you feeling about that?
It's a good question, because I don't think I've really thought about it yet. You're right. This last year, I haven't had to go to network events. I haven't had to go to anything. No social events, no networking events, no professional or social. How do I feel about it? I'm quite happy here. With all of the negative sides that lockdown has brought and that COVID has brought to our worlds, it's one aspect where I think, do you know what? I'm quite happy here in my little office in my house. If I never have to go to another team build or building activity or anything where I'm going to be surrounded by lots of people, I'm not sure I'm that bothered. And I think when it gets to the point, because I know I'll have to, because it's my job, apart from the additional stuff, I run training sessions, so I have to go and I have to meet people. And when I've done that online over the last year, it's been fine. It hasn't been a problem at all. I haven't felt, and maybe this is another aspect that we think about, I've not felt anxious about those situations.
That's interesting.
It is interesting.
What have you had some thoughts as to why?
No, because until that minute, I hadn't realised. I honestly hadn't realised. I get performance anxiety about it, not to the same level as the social anxiety that I would have got before. But why is it different? Only yesterday, I was running training sessions for groups of 7 or 8 people. I had some nerves about doing it because obviously, I'm performing, but I didn't feel socially anxious like I would have done if I'd have been doing that in real life. What's the difference?
Well, in a flippant way, if you're getting it wrong and you're starting to have a panic, you can say you've got network problems. You've got a way out, haven't you? That's saving face. Whereas if you're in a room of people and you start having that, as I have been, you have that attack of imposter syndrome, you've still got to carry on, and it's scary. And like we've said before, you can have anxiety about anxiety. So it might be that if I'm going to do some sort of event or anything, I can start feeling really anxious. Well, what about if I'm in the middle of that presentation or something and I have that, I can't do this, I don't belong here, I'm a fraud, and what have you. It might remove some of that feeling. You've got your tools in front of you when you're doing it on Zoom. You've got your notes in front of you. No one can see what your backup is around you. When you're in a meeting, your armoury all has to be hidden, the tools that you need to get through it, and you have to be able to deal with it with a front on. Whereas via Zoom, you can have all your armoury laid out on your desk. But even if you don't need them, you've got that piece of paper there. You can have something stuck on the wall in front of you that no one's ever going to see. You've got your water and I don't know, whatever easy little things that you need to help you make you feel comfortable are there. And of course, we feel more comfortable at home. It's home, so you feel safe anyway, don't you? But I think this could become more of an issue for people as they're used to not doing it. And this gets onto something else as well, really. I don't think it's social anxiety, but we live really, really busy lives. I have 3 children. They're all at the age that I still need to take them places. They're reliant on me still. It's getting better from when they were all infants, but they still all rely on me. And I can be busy from the moment I wake up to the moment I just collapse into bed at the end of the day. And I know a lot of people are in that position. Now, what lockdown has meant is that I don't have to do half of that running around anymore. I don't have to fit in all the socials. I haven't had to fit in that friend and this friend or my friend and their friend and the dinner to do them round and so on. So my actual workload has been reduced during lockdown. I'm not saying my stress load has gone because it's been replaced by homeschooling or what have you and all the other stuff that we worry about. But the actual sort of running around has reduced massively. And I know a lot of my friends have gone, actually, do you know what? It's quite nice. Yeah. And a lot of people are enjoying having less to do and enjoying being at home and in their safety of their bubble, which makes you think, have we all been pushing ourselves out of our comfort zone for far too many years and doing all this stuff to meet social pressures because we feel like we should, that should word again, Andy.
Yeah.
When actually, maybe, generally, yes, we are social beings, but maybe we're not that social. You know, maybe if we were really true and think, who am I? Maybe we're all quite happy being at home with a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a party every now and then. But maybe we're not designed to be filling every minute of every day with some sort of social. And the biggest thing for me, thinking about coming out of lockdown, was I immediately started to feel overwhelmed about putting all those socials back in and the club starting back up and being the taxi driver mum and taking my kids here, there and everything. I thought, oh my God, I don't want to go back to that. So it's really interesting in the fact that if you were to have your happy medium and start from a clean slate again, what would you actually aspire? What would be your ideal balance of socialness?
Because there's so much expectation forced upon us, isn't there? Yeah. So much. And it's all been removed. And in a lot of ways, it's been replaced with the expectation you won't go out socially. Perhaps you're right. Maybe for a lot of people, that has been better for them. Yeah. And they might not have even realised it. Because we were almost told right from the beginning, this is going to be difficult. And you can't be with people anymore. And you're going to have to stop going out. We were told that. How much of that actually we took it on and said, this is going to be difficult, this is going to be hard. And we believed that, but it wasn't actually that hard.
Yeah.
Like you say, you know, it's been replaced with other pressures. For you, the homeschooling, you know, and for any parent, I can't imagine what it's been like for the homeschooling piece, in addition to the day job. A lot of the other pressures have been removed and putting them back in place is going to be hard.
Yeah. And already I've done it since we can, following the guidelines, and it's been lovely. It's been lovely catching up with everybody. Can't say my liver has really benefited that much, but what I need to now do is just go, okay, make a conscious decision of how I want to move forward, because I love parties. I love having every minute of everything filled. But actually, do I? I mean, do I? Am I doing that because that was just my habit and my, you know, where I was actually quite happy doing less. It's easier for my family because I'm making them go here, there and everywhere. It's time to think, isn't it? How do you want to move forward out of lockdown? And to what degree do you want to push yourself out of the comfort zone? I think that's the question, because this is a discussion about anxiety.
Yeah.
You know, you don't necessarily have to avoid certain situations because it's uncomfortable, because there are certain things you can do to help you and you take little steps, and you don't have to force yourself either. You know, it's just actually being conscious and aware of going, right, what is it I really want to achieve, and what are some of the compromises or the things I need to do to help me get there. Make conscious decisions. I think that's what's important, isn't it? Making conscious decisions, what's good for us. I often have this analogy of me being a ball inside a pinball machine, literally, you know, those old electronic ones when you go bing, 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 you know, I often see myself as that ball, and how much of those things do I really need to be bouncing around between, making a conscious decision instead of bouncing around, the conscious decision of the path of my ball. And there you go. And I did start waffling. And I'm talking about my balls. So I need to stop. Is that a good point to stop?
Well, as long as I don't talk about my balls, it's fine. That's a different podcast altogether.
Oh dear.
And maybe this is a good time for us to segue nicely into what can we do. We both find that we have these mental, psychological battles with ourselves. It doesn't seem to matter how much we do and how much we know about the issue, we still struggle with it. So what can we do, and what can the people listening do, which is going to help them? And this is a really good reminder for us as well of what we should be doing. Is that should word? What we should be doing to help ourselves.
Could be doing. For me, it goes back to that point that I didn't know that. I don't even want to use the normal word, but I didn't know that not everyone thought as much as I did. I didn't know. I thought everyone was just coping with it a lot better. So it was a failing in me that I was feeling some of this uneasiness, and so I quashed it. I didn't embrace it. I ran away from it. Because probably my history of studying psychology and all this, then I understood it. I knew it. So it didn't apply to me. Denial would be a big word, or lack of self-acceptance, or lack of willingness to embrace, I suppose. So I ran away from it. So the first thing, again, is about having that level of self-awareness, talking about it and embracing it, that actually there may be something here that you are having to deal with that not everyone else is. So first of all, give yourself some time and give yourself some space to think about that and go, right, I need to deal with something now. I have got an extra challenge in my life that perhaps other people don't have. And give yourself a break for that first.
And there's also a little bit of normalization there too. The fact that, yes, other people might not, but other people might have. There's the two sides to that coin, isn't there? There's the fact that you might be struggling a little bit more than the person next to you, or they might be struggling just the same. So you've got a comrade in arms, if you like. I think that's why we chat, because we have very similar anxieties and psychological struggles. And I think knowing that you do allows me to be able to be a lot more open, to be able to speak to you, because I know you'll understand.
Yeah.
And I know that you'll keep me in check as well.
Yeah, but that's why we want to do this podcast, isn't it? That we're able to talk and share some of these experiences. And this is the biggest thing. We've only started dialoguing. We've only met each other in January. That's
not in person yet.
Not even in person yet, only Zoom, and yet we've got this space.
I find that really difficult to believe.
I know.
We've actually met each other.
I'm actually scared to do that now. I think that's what's really important, is being able to talk to someone, feel safe enough to explore some of these feelings, which is hard when you are getting on with life and you're trying to do the school run, you're trying to fit into these norms of your colleagues and all of this, to actually then say, my brain doesn't ever seem to stop. How do I switch it off? And that fear to do that, because someone might just, I don't know, it's not that they won't accept, it's just having someone who you can talk to and be open with. If you're in a position that actually is affecting your quality of life, there is help out there. And so that's really important for us to signpost people that there is professionals, and always talk to your GP if you are concerned about these things.
What we'll do in the podcast information and on our website and in all of our social media channels is we will put links to all of the places you can go to get free help. There is so much guidance and advice that you can get for free. Connect with us as well, contact us through our website, because we can talk, and there are so many places you can go to get help.
Yeah. And obviously other people have different feelings. There could be people out there who are feeling really depressed, and there's a lot of different realms out there that people are going to feel. We're specifically talking about anxious feelings and anxiety because that's quite close to our home. I think what's another key thing is being aware that when you do have anxiety, you then can worry about worrying, and you can have anxiety about having anxiety. Just classic for that is, I did my first webinar last week. Oh my gosh, I was a panel talking on a webinar for business. And it's probably worth mentioning, I took a maternity break for 13 years. I have been working for the last few years, but nothing to the capacity of being back in that corporate world. So it was a big deal for me. And I found myself worrying about how I would be on the webinar, because I would be nervous. I would be anxious on the webinar. So therefore, I was having anxiety about having anxiety.
Yeah.
Someone said that to me, right? And so being aware of it and what I was doing, it wasn't as simply saying, okay, stop, because there's lots of times we know what we're doing, we want to stop, and you can't, and that's part of the problem. Yeah. But I found it interesting to go, actually, yes, that's what I'm doing. I didn't realise that that's what I was doing. And it helped. It really helped to be aware of that. And that's why I think there's such a lot of good work out there by a lot of good organisations to try and help promote this. And, we are seeing that movement through lockdown, post-lockdown, of more help towards mental health. And I think it's so important because you don't have to soldier on your own with no help. I know some of the help is hard to come by because it's funding, and government funding and is tight on some things, but it is out there. iTalk is out there. That's a really good process and programme in place funded through the NHS. So that's brilliant. it's just accessing that help. That would be my biggest thing. Access help. Don't be afraid.
And you can help yourself a lot. I had some psychotherapy, but I have since helped myself a lot. And I've probably done more change with my own research, investigation, acceptance than I ever did when I was having the psychotherapy. Because there's tons of information.
Yeah.
And applying it isn't easy, and you will have to keep going. And we both admitted in this podcast and before that this is a journey. To use your words, Joe, this is a journey we're on, and it's a long journey. I am certainly a work in progress when it comes to my mental health, and I think I will be for a long time. But realizing that is part of the battle, and realizing that I'm not perfect and I don't need to be perfect. I am enough.
Such important words that, and a lot of therapists use those words, you are enough. And actually, if you're perfect, well, not that you ever will be, but that's boring, isn't it? It's much more reality to being flawed and a little bit quirky and a little bit different and interesting. I've definitely had some words with myself about why perfectionism and all that. But just reminded me again, you saying about the journey was something you were talking about earlier on, because I said, I can't believe I'm coming up to 50 and still learning all this stuff. And the reason why I was saying that is because when I was a kid, I remember looking at my parents at the age that I am now, thinking, oh, what have they got to worry about in life? They've got life sorted. I was a teenager full of angst, all these thoughts again, and God, life's so hard at that age, and of course it is relative at that time. It's all valid, and you have got a lot of weight on your shoulders at that age. But absolutely, I didn't think that at my age I would still be learning, that I would still be facing some of the biggest challenges I've ever had. And yes, life does get easier in lots of ways, but you're learning. The very nature of us as human beings, we're learning all the time, and we are challenging ourselves and we're facing these things. And I hope it never actually stops. I do hope I get to the point where I can walk the dog and just enjoy the sounds of the birds, and I can do my Pilates and yoga. I hope I get to that point. But I want to keep being self-aware and improving my self-awareness and reflecting, perhaps knowing when to put the full stop so I don't catastrophize and stop the thinking, but actually because from it becomes creative ideas, pushes you forward, creates something new. If we weren't like that, we wouldn't be doing this now. That might help someone else, would we? We'd have just gone, well, we're pushing ourselves all the time, and it's actually has a lot of positives.
If you could go back to that angst-ridden teenager that you were, what would be the one thing that you would say to her?
That's a great question. Don't care so much what other people think, or don't feel the need to seek their validation. It's a hiding to nothing. What about you? Same question to you.
Even upsets me thinking about it. Don't worry, you are good enough. Whatever you feel inside, you are good enough, and you will make a difference.
You are making a difference. You are. Right now, you're making a difference.
Right, so let's finish the podcast there before I go off and bawl my eyes out.
Well, it's emotional stuff. We're bringing ourselves to the front, and thank you for sharing. And, it is really emotional because this is not easily spoken about. You're dealing with things inside yourselves that perhaps we've been hiding for years because we felt whatever reasons. But it's good. Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. Are you okay? Let's finish on a few breaths.
2 minutes of deep breathing, I'll be fine.
Yeah. Let's not belittle it now. Yes.
Let's bring the podcast to an end. So thank you, Joe, for today. It's been great talking about anxiety with you. I'm going to go away and do some lots of deep breathing and feel much better about my day. So thank you to everyone who's been listening, and we'll see you again in a month's time. And remember to check out our social media channels and see all the tips and hints that we share on there throughout the month. Thanks a lot.
Hang on, Andy. Can I just say, sorry, if anyone's feeling emotional having listened to this, because this is what I will then go away and worry about, and I don't want to do that. If anyone is feeling emotional at the result of that, then please speak to a friend, speak to a GP, look at the support that's out there. Mind are brilliant. And as Andy said, you can contact us, but just be reassured you're not on your own. You're not on your own.
And you are totally human.
Absolutely. Right. Thank you, Andy. Thank you.
Thanks, Jo. See you next time.
Bye. Oh my God.
Turn the recording off and turn the recording off.